Trade deadline is getting very, very close, and more reports are starting to surface regarding the Miami Heat. And a recent report has indicated from Shams that the Miami Heat could be interested in pursuing Demar DeRozan, and that Demar DeRozan might be interested in coming to Miami. So we'll break that down and discuss what potential packages would make sense for the Heat as well as the Bulls. Stay tuned for all that in this episode, but before we do, a quick reminder to hit the subscribe button. 98% of you who are watching are not subscribed. Scroll down if you aren't already, hit that button. We are on the road to 1,000, and we're less than 250 away, so make sure to do that because we are getting very close. Now, Houston, this is an interesting one, and obviously we thought the Heat may have been done their big moves after acquiring Terry Rozier, but we've seen them struggle a little bit with the Terry Rozier acquisition. I think that'll all work itself out. But another move might be in order, and it's another forward, I guess. And there's multiple reports here. I'll pop them up right now. You can see one of them saying, from Dior Washburn from ESPN, saying DeMar DeRozan is a real possibility for the Miami Heat ahead of the deadline per Shams. And basically, DeMar is a player to monitor leading up to the deadline. And the Bulls are open to finding calls or fielding calls on DeRozan as extension talks went south and went nowhere. If DeRozan isn't traded by Thursday, there's a real possibility that he walks in free agency, and that DeMar DeRozan and his representatives prefer the Miami Heat as one of his potential trade destinations. So a lot to unpack here. We can unpack the fit and potential trades later in this video, but what are your initial thoughts on that? DeMar DeRozan potential visit to Miami Heat for the end of the season and maybe even beyond that?
It's going to be interesting. The Miami Heat are definitely seem to be buyers going into the trade deadline. I know that we still have 3 days until it expires, but they seem like they're big buyers, probably one of the bigger buyers out of all the teams in the NBA. DeMar DeRozan's an interesting one, though. He is another forward, like you said, really played the two early in his career. Now he's basically dominantly a small forward. He is 6'6", so he has good height. He has good length with the wingspan, but I don't know. It's not really what the Miami Heat seem like they need on paper. He's another 20-point per game scorer, which would just be ridiculous to add to this team, but it's going to be interesting. His defensive numbers are up this year compared to the rest of the years in his career, but again, not that big defensive name you'd think that Miami would go after.
Yeah, he's not a big man. And obviously, you can look at his stats here. He's been a very good player. He's definitely a veteran. He can be clutch at times, averaging this season 22, 5, and 4. And he's a very good facilitator as well. And you kind of mentioned he's averaging 1.2 steals. The defense has gotten slightly better, so he would definitely not hinder them defensively. But at the same time, depending who you surround him with, it might not be exactly what the Bulls need. But if you slide him into the starting lineup, again, at this point, you're talking about so many players who average 20 points per game up. Like, you would be having one of the best, if not the best offense in the league. But we've seen that it's yet to come together for the Heat, especially since adding Terry Rozier. We mentioned how they're at 5 starters averaging 20 points per game. Jaime Jaquez has cooled off a little bit. Spo, we saw him get mad in the other game, I don't know, yesterday or the day before, for Jaime Jaquez's defense. So a lot of things need to come together here, and I think defense is obviously going to be their priority. That being said, he is on an expiring deal. He'll be a free agent after this year, so if you can get him for cheap, and I'll get into a couple trade packages and one I saw online here in a minute, but if you can get him for cheap, then I don't see a reason. It's tough because we do not necessarily need him. The Heat do not need him. They need a big man. I much prefer going after a guy like Nick Claxton, but if DeMar DeRozan is getting traded for pennies on the dollar because he is going to leave the Chicago Bulls, I cannot see a world where they get close to an extension, especially after the season. And if he wants to be in Miami, maybe this would be more than a rental for the Heat.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he was more than just a rental for the Miami Heat. But again, with that price for DeMar DeRozan, after they got Terry Rozier for just Lowry and that draft pick a few years down the line, I can't imagine that someone like DeMar DeRozan on a team like the Chicago Bulls, in the situation that both parties are currently in, could be worth all that much, at least in a way, from the Bulls' perspective and what they're asking for him, especially after we just saw Terry Rozier in that past trade. I don't think their asking price is going to be as crazy as someone like the Nets, who have just been, from rumored at least, people for like Dorian Finney-Smith asking all those draft picks and shutting down the Mikal Bridges trades. It's going to be interesting. I think the Bulls are much closer to sellers than a lot of the other teams, so I don't think it'll be much.
Yeah,
Hopefully not.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But you've seen the market has been a bit ridiculous here, and I'm going to throw this one up.
Yeah.
This was from December, so this is just, I think it was from late December. Just to throw this out there, it's kind of funny how the things have changed. Now you're going to laugh. You might even spit out your water if you're watching this video. This was from a website, and the detail. This was again a month and a half ago. This is just one I found, and it kind of goes to show. It's DeMar DeRozan for Tyler Hero, a 2024 first and a 2026 first. Obviously, they don't have both those picks anymore after the Rozier trade. But the point is, this is what the market was supposedly going to look like for a guy like DeMar DeRozan. 2 firsts and Hero for DeMar. I don't even know if the Bulls would be willing to give up Hero for DeMar straight up. They probably wouldn't, unless I guess maybe they're guaranteed an extension. But looking back at this now, obviously we can both agree that's never going to happen. 2 first-round picks.
Right.
They don't even have the 2024 first-round pick and Tyler Hero. But looking at a potential package now as we kind of transition into what the Heat might be willing to give up, I mean, is it going to be the same package that we've been talking about for all of the guys in a lot of these videos? Jovic and a first? Do we even wanting to give up a first? I think it'll take a first to get DeMar. I don't think it'll take 3 firsts or anything like that. Maybe Jovic and 1 first probably seems reasonable, I would suspect, from the Heat perspective and from the Bulls perspective. Do you think that would be... Again, he is a veteran. He's still a great player, a great facilitator, a decent defender now in his career. But I don't know if maybe another team would be able to outbid, or maybe a team that wants... The Lakers even would want a guy like DeMar more than the Heat would, given what they've already done this offseason, or this trade deadline, sorry.
Yeah. Whether it just comes down to what Miami wants to give up and what they're willing to give up for DeMar. Like you said, Jovic in a first seems like that would probably be the go-to trade. Caleb Martin has been playing really well, at least over the last 2 or 3 games. Last night against the Clippers, he played really well. He made a bunch of tough shots, and he's always willing to play defense, especially when it's Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, all these big names, and even James Harden, who killed us last night. It seemed like that guy couldn't miss down the stretch. But Caleb Martin's going to be interesting. He's been playing a lot better, like I said. So I don't know if they're going to be willing to give him up. He is really young. A lot of these players are just so young. It's interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see what Miami takes for a route here, because we're giving up a lot of role players to get back another 20-point per game score. It's so different. It's such a weird scenario for Miami.
Yeah, and the question now is, you mentioned how many, I guess those role players the Heat have. At what point do they start to offload some of them to get, not necessarily DeMar DeRozan, but to get someone who can really put them over the top? Now, obviously, you wouldn't be able to do a Jovic and a pick for DeRozan because the salaries would have to match up. So whether you include, I don't know who all the salaries off the top of my head, whether you include, I mean, Hero's not going to be included. Martin's salary wouldn't match up. So you'd have to, matching salaries would make this a bit more complicated than it would have been otherwise. But I tend to agree with you that, I mean, we know DeMar would want to come to Miami and he'd want to stay, so that's a good thing. And this would not be a one-year rental like Rozier might end up being, depending on how all this works out, depending on how long Rozier ends up staying in Miami is still up in the air. But I don't mind DeRozan. That being said, if another high-volume guy needs the ball in his hands. Now, obviously, his shots is down this year. It's the lowest it's been in his career since like 2012, putting up like 13 twos a game. So he's not shooting as much, but it's very, very interesting. At least his twos, his overall percentages are around the same. But do you have any thoughts on this before we wrap up? It's different. It's interesting. And the report came out today and some shams, so this might end up happening, Houston. It's possible. If they don't think they can get a big man, maybe they just pivot to this because they need to do something.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they did end up reaching out for DeMar DeRozan. Can't wait to see what the package looks like. And honestly, I can't wait to watch these next 3 days unfold, as the Miami Heat seem like they're going to be big buyers before the deadline. And it's the 5th, and we have till the 8th. Last thing, DeMar, he's averaged 20 or more points in every year of his career, excluding the first 4. So if he did end up in Miami, maybe we'll just forget about defense and we'll just try to be the Pacers and put up 150 points a game and beat everybody.
Yeah, if Rozier gets his shot going, that could be very, very dangerous. But that'll wrap it up. Let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on DeMar DeRozan, another kind of volume guy. But he does some other intangible things as well that some other players don't do. But that'll wrap it up. Thank you guys for watching. See you tomorrow.